Welcome to episode 1 of This is Real Life with Jenn Blossom. I wanted to come on here and give a brief introduction of what you can expect to hear from us this season, my very first season of this show. I kind of wanted to start out just giving a little background on myself. I am a mom of 2 kids and a wife. I have a master's in education with an emphasis in special education, a bachelor's degree in psychology, and I am a lifelong learner for sure. I read, I am constantly trying to figure things out. There is no perfection in me whatsoever. There's just a lot of learning. That being said, I have been on a journey of self-discovery, I would say very intently the last handful of years. And I've discovered a lot of things about myself that is congruent with those of mine who are the same age as me or at the same stage of life as me. We have a lot in common. Now, I don't know if I would know these things about them and that if I did have anything in common with them, except for the fact that I'm very open with all of my struggles and my personal traumas. And that being said, I've learned a lot about other people. They've been very open and honest with me too. I've been very careful with privacy, and I think that that's something that I really am proud of. I don't share other people's stories. They do that. And so I was, through my sharing of my story, I learned, first of all, that I wasn't alone, that I wasn't the only one that had gone through certain things. I learned that there is hope and recovery and a possibility of like a healthy, thriving life. And it felt good. It felt very isolating before I started sharing my stories. And now I'm feeling like I kind of created a community of very authentic, vulnerable women, safe women for me. And so I had this idea, I wonder if I could start some sort of story sharing thing. And my husband had podcast stuff, microphones and cords and stuff. And I thought, you know what? I already have this in my house. Why not just start a podcast? Okay, and what are you going to talk about, Jen? Thanks for asking, Jen. Okay, we're going to talk about all things that you're not supposed to talk about, because that's the kind of stuff I want to hear about. I am all about talking about the thing that you wouldn't say to your grandma. I want to say it. All the stories that bring about guilt and shame, I want to hear it. I found that sharing the stories of pain and guilt and shame and all those yucky emotions actually brings freedom, because it takes your secrets, it takes the power away from these secrets. And I basically started texting some girlfriends of mine who I am well aware of their stories and the different things that they've come and gone through. And I asked them, hey, I'm thinking about doing this thing. Would you want to be a guest on my show? And crazy enough, every single person, except for probably one, I think, said yes. They said that they were at a point in their life when they're ready to talk about it. So on the show, I'm going to have people, women that I know, friends of women that I know, and we are going to talk about things like anorexia and bulimia. We're going to talk about drug addiction and alcoholism and being a mom while you're trying to keep this facade of healthy living when you're really an addict. We're going to talk about childhood sexual abuse and how someone can even recover from that. And we're going to talk about chronic pain and what it's like to live with chronic pain. We're going to talk about parenting. We're going to talk about marriage and how it is freaking hard to be married. We're going to talk about friendships. We're going to talk about sex, because, that's the most faux pas thing you don't talk about with grandma, unless it's Dr. Ruth, I guess. We're going to talk about divorce. We're going to talk about physical abuse, domestic violence. We're going to talk about DNA and your life's narrative and how that can change. And so, yeah, these are all very these are all topics from people who seemingly look very high functioning. You know, they've got their shit together, their hair is done and their makeup is on, and yet you would have no idea that they're struggling. And I find that when you see somebody who you perceive as having it all together and you learn that they actually don't, it makes you feel less alone and less bad about yourself, and helps you offer grace to yourself and acceptance to other people. And so I think that that's kind of my hope. My hope is that somebody somewhere far off in the land hears a story about any one of these topics and says, oh my gosh, that's me. And oh my gosh, I'm not alone. And oh my gosh, I too can recover. Like, I too can have a life that isn't burdened by anxiety and depression and alcohol and self-medication and all of these things. Like, there's freedom, and it's possible. So these are not all people that you would normally take advice from. This is not a therapy channel. No one here, well, I'm not a licensed therapist. This is not therapy 101. This is just people telling their stories from a brave, vulnerable place in hopes that their story wouldn't be in vain, that it would actually help somebody else. And so I've already done most of the season so far. I've already recorded most of the episodes. My plan is to release them weekly and hopefully get some good discussion coming up. I would love to host a show where we can go back to the people that I've already interviewed and kind of answer questions if you have any about certain topics from the guests themselves. I've also recorded them on like a video as well, so I'm hoping to get them up on a YouTube thing for people who like to see visual things. I can't always promise I'll have my makeup and hair done, but you know, I can aspire to. So I guess with that being said, I'm super nervous. I'm nervous that I'm going to say something stupid. I'm nervous that I'm going to look like an idiot sometimes. I'm nervous that this stuff won't be received the way that I want it to be received. You know, I've got all of the nervous butterfly feels. I'm nervous about eventually telling my story, which will come at the end of the season. So I wanted to be vulnerable about that. But here's the deal about fear. I never want fear to stop me from doing something. I actually want to feel the fear and do it anyways. I think that that's something I've learned along the way. And so that being said, I know that this probably isn't for everybody. And if you have something nasty to say, maybe, you know, just bite your tongue, you know. I would love to hear comments. I would love some feedback on what topics you'd like to hear about, what things that you're struggling with, how these stories have impacted your life. All that being said, I'm grateful that you've tuned in. I'm grateful that you are in a place that you are looking for community or hope or maybe some tidbits of information. And I guess that's my prayer. My prayer is that all of this yucky stuff that we have buried and held inside is released, and we are able to live the full life that we were meant to live. That being said, I hope I didn't say too many times. And I hope you tune in to hear all of the rest of the season, and that it is a positive way for you to find that you're not alone. Thanks again for joining my first little intro. Our first episode is actually going to be about anorexia and body image, so stay tuned for that. And then every week from here on out. All right, you guys, God bless you. Bye.